Now, in this AutoCAD electrical course for beginners, Scott Onstott will show you all that you need to learn about AutoCAD electrical software right from scratch. Now, this video is made in a step-by-step way, where the first part is a beginner tutorial series where you'll learn everything about AutoCAD electrical right from scratch, and in the second part, you'll make a project using tools that you've learned in the part 1. Now, if you want to earn a certificate of completion for finishing this course, then check the link in the description of the video and also in the pinned comment to enroll in this completely free AutoCAD Electrical Essentials course. You can also download all the lesson files used in this course after enrolling in the AutoCAD Electrical Essentials course. So with that, let's get started.
In this video, I'm going to show you how you can get started with AutoCAD Electrical 2024. This is Scott Onstott here, and I'm going to be guiding you through the software as if you've never used it before. Maybe you have a little bit of AutoCAD experience, but that's not necessary for this tutorial. So when I launch the software, I'm presented with the Start tab right here, and I can see various information over here. I can look at recent documents. If you have documents in the cloud, you need to install the Autodesk desktop connector, and then you can access those projects. There's some learning content here and various web links down below. I'd like to create a new project in the project manager, but it's grayed out. This is the button that I want to use right here. And it's grayed out because we're in what they call the zero doc state. And to get out of that, we just have to create a drawing or open an existing drawing. I'll just click New right here, and it will use the default template to make a new drawing. And this drawing isn't part of any project yet, but that enables all of the functionality in the project manager. And then I can go ahead and click New Project right here. And then we have to give the new project a name. Let's call it Getting Started. And the location will default to this path under the Documents tree. And you can change that, of course. If you're working in a company, this would more likely be on a file server. Whenever you create a new project, it's a good idea to create a folder with the project name. So here we have the full path, and it's in a folder called Getting Started. And this is going to be generating a new configuration file called projectname.wdp. This is short for Wiring Diagram Project. And it's a text file that contains various configuration information. But this is how we can identify this project. Now down below, we can copy the settings from another project file, another WDP file. And I've chosen to copy from the NFPA demo project. That is the current project over here. So because it was the current project and it's at the top of the list, that's what's going to show up here. But you could browse for a different one if you wanted to. I'm going to use the NFPA standard, which is a North American fire protection standard, and it uses imperial units. And AutoCAD Electrical ships with a whole variety of different standards, and we have all these demo projects which can help you bootstrap your own projects. GB is a Chinese standard, IEC is an international one that uses metric units, IEEE is also international. JIS is an older deprecated standard in North America, but still used. We have a kind of a variety of different things in here. So that said, I'm just going to dive right in and click OK to generate the project. And that will result in the creation of that WDP file in the Getting Started folder on the hard drive. But so far, that project doesn't really have any drawings in it. It's just been defined as a project, and you can see it now at the top of the list. It says Getting Started. And you can see right here where it's stored, and it also makes a Microsoft Access database that's associated with it, and it puts it in a different folder, which you can see right down here. And so this is all handled automatically. You don't have to worry about it. Now we have a project. And within that project, that's where we're going to place all of our drawings. And so if you look at some of the other projects, you can see that they have subfolders in many cases, schematic and panel. And we could do that too. We could make subfolders or not. It just depends on the complexity of your project. I don't think I will make a subfolder, but if I wanted to, I could right-click on my project and say Add Subfolder. But now I'd like to skip over the subfolder and just create a new drawing within the project. And I can do that right up here in the Adjacent button. This is New Drawing. And we get yet another dialog box. And you'll find AutoCAD Electrical it has so many different dialog boxes that you have to fill out. This is just the way the software works. It's built on top of AutoCAD, and it really is a very complicated and kind of an amazing set of features that are available here, but it's all built on base AutoCAD. So if you're a longtime AutoCAD user, you might see a lot of the kind of things you're familiar with, but you'll find that there's quite a very complicated system built on top of all of that. And so when you want to create a new drawing, you do it here. You don't just go up and create a new blank drawing, or it wouldn't be part of your project. You have to do it here in the project manager. So the drawing file name, I'm going to call this one Sheet 01. And the template that I will use to create that drawing file, I can browse for. And that's going to take me to the default template folder, which is deeply nested in the file system. And this is a standard AutoCAD feature. And in the template folder, because AutoCAD Electrical is built on base AutoCAD, you're going to find the base AutoCAD templates in here. And they start with lowercase ACAD. So you see a number of them in here. The AutoCAD Electrical templates are all in caps. And so you have, this is the primary template for imperial units. And this one uses the IEC standard, which is in metric units. Down below, we have various standards for different sheets. ANSI is a standard used in North America, and we have different lettered sheet sizes, A, B, C, D. DIN is a German standard, and you have different sheet sizes, A1, A2, A3, and so on. GB is a Chinese standard, and so on. You have all kinds of choices in here, but if you're actually working in a company, it's very likely the company would have its own standard that you would select here. I'm going to check AutoCAD_electrical.dwt and open that, and that will contain the title block that we will be using in the project.
Now, so far, you must have seen that the topics of AutoCAD Electrical are explained in a gradual step-by-step way with practical examples. But after this course, the next step for you should be to get a professional level expertise in AutoCAD Electrical, which you can get with the AutoCAD Electrical full course by Scott Onstott on SourceCAD. Now check the course by clicking the card somewhere at the top of the video and also in the description of this video. Now, back to learning AutoCAD Electrical.
This will be stored in the default location on the C drive, and we have the chance to write in optional descriptions here. And I'll type in description 1, I'll type it in all caps, and I'll type in schematic. And we have all these other optional attributes that we can fill out if we want to. These would indicate perhaps the project code, like a code number or a name. You can use this in different ways depending on how you want to use AutoCAD Electrical. The installation might be a facility. This might be a location within it. The section might be even more granular information about like the room that it's in or something. The subsection might be like a particular panel or piece of equipment that you're creating a diagram of. The sheet would be the number on the sheet. Let's say this is sheet 1. And then the drawing number, I'm going to say this is drawing number 101. And then you have a choice of OK properties or just OK. If you just click OK, it'll close this. And if you go to OK properties, that will open up another dialog box in a moment that takes you into the drawing properties. So we can get to this in various ways, but this is one way we can get to it. And here we can alter what we've just entered, or we can go to these other tabs where we have different choices about how the project is set up. And there's really a lot in here to peruse and take a look at. These are different visual styles for these features that you can select from. And the drawing format tab talks about your reference systems and how you want those to be represented. You can choose different systems here. So this is on the drawing level of just this particular drawing. I can customize all of that for it. I'll click OK. And now I'm in my first drawing. Now over here in the project manager, I don't see it. I have to click refresh over here. And then you'll see that it's indented underneath our project. There's our sheet 1. All right, now what is in this sheet is a title block in model space. And if you're a longtime AutoCAD user, you might be surprised by this. I know I was when I first started using AutoCAD Electrical, because for a couple of decades now, title blocks have been in layout tabs in paper space. And it's kind of amazing that we're finding the title block here in model space, but that is how AutoCAD Electrical is designed to work. We don't use layout tabs here. We keep everything simple. We keep it all in model space. So this is our actual sheet. It's in real world scale. So this is, whatever size it is in inches, it's probably about 36 inches wide or so. And the drawing that I'm going to draw in here doesn't really have a scale. It's just going to be a schematic diagram of some kind. So scale isn't a factor typically in electrical drawings, and therefore we can just keep it simple and put everything in model space. Now, over here we have the title block, which was part of the template, and in the more extensive course that I have available at sourcecad.com, I show you how you can customize this template with your own logo and your own attributes and so on. But for now, I'm just going to keep going here and zoom in, and you can see that we have a little bit of information in our title block. It says schematic. Do you remember we typed that in as description 1 in our project? And then down here, it's drawing number 101. It's sheet 1 of 1. We're getting this information because we entered that in the project properties, or rather in the drawing properties. So if I wanted to access that again, I could right click on the drawing and go into its properties. And you can see this information is right in here. There's the word schematic. The project itself also has its own set of properties. If you right click on the project, you can go down to properties, and it has its own set of properties that, there's a separate project settings tab, which shows the path to your library folders. But it also has similar tabs here that we saw in the drawing properties. It has the same information here again. And so there's these two levels of properties that exist in AutoCAD Electrical. You can specify them in the project as a whole, or you can specify them in each separate drawing. And so they can possibly differ. And there's a way that you can compare them. So if I were to change the settings in the project as compared to the drawing, I could compare them and see how they've diverged. So that said, let me enter a little bit more information in here. And I'll do that I want to right click on the project and go to descriptions. And so this is going to be common to all of the drawings. And so what I can do in here is type in data in here. So I could say this is my demo project. I'll type that in all caps, demo tab project, and then OK. And nothing seems to have changed over here. And the reason is AutoCAD Electrical is quite manual in how everything gets updated. If I want to see that information over here, I have to update my title block right over here, title block update. And here are those pieces of data that I entered, demo project. So if I want to update those, I have to select them here. And you can see that I have a lot of other things I could update. All through here, all these different information I could update. And then I can update it across the entire project or just the active drawing. I'll click OK, active drawing only, and it gets updated over here. So this is like another step in as compared to base AutoCAD, where in base AutoCAD you would just like edit the attribute and then you would see it. But in AutoCAD Electrical, there's like multiple steps. You have to edit the data, and then you have to run this other command that actually updates the title block. So this is kind of typical of how this program works. It's built on top of AutoCAD, and so it has its own way of doing things. Let me make another drawing here. I'll right-click on Getting Started, and I could add drawings. This would be to add existing drawings, or I could just create a new drawing. I'm going to start from scratch and create a new drawing. And I'll call that one sheet 2. And I have all caps, I have caps lock on, so let me just fix that, sheet 02. And it'll use the same items that you used previously, so I don't need to change anything here. And I'll call this one panel, and this will be sheet 2, and it will be drawing 102. And then I can say OK properties to create the drawing and go into its properties. And you can see there's the word panel in there. And we have these tabs across the top that allow us to configure everything. And I'm not going to change anything, but I'm just showing you. And then Over here, you can see it says Demo Project, Panel, Sheet 102. So I've created 2 sheets in the project so far, and I need to refresh over here, and then I can see both of them. Okay? Now, we have these sheets in our project, and we can access them by double-clicking on them. I can double-click on sheet 1 to open it. You can see it's open up here. But AutoCAD Electrical has another way of navigating between drawings, and it's built in right up here, Previous Drawing and Next Drawing. And these are going to cycle through the drawings in your project. So right now I'm on sheet 1. If I click on Next Drawing, it's going to go to sheet 2. It also closed sheet 1. If I click Next Drawing, nothing happens because I'm at the end of the list. So I can go Previous Drawing, and it will go back to sheet 1. And notice that it also closed sheet 2. So the idea here is that you should probably work on one drawing at a time if you're working in a team, because whoever has that drawing open has a file lock on it. And so this navigation method is useful so that you tend to just be in one drawing at a time. I can say Next Drawing, and then I can be in my panel drawing, and it automatically closes sheet 1. So that's a good practice to be in. And in fact, this is used so frequently that these arrows are up here on the quick access toolbar up above. I've actually added my layer drop down here on the quick access toolbar, and this, you wouldn't see that by default. And I've done that by clicking on this down arrow here and choosing layer from the list, just so I can have quick access to this. Otherwise, you would find the layers on the Home tab right over here. And we didn't create these layers. These were automatically created for us when we created our drawings. And that was created through I believe through the project properties up here. I go to Drawing Format and I click over here on Define Layers. This is where all of these different categories are getting their layer names from, right here. So wires end up being on a separate layer called Wires, which is not listed here. And let's see if we can find that here. There it is, Wires. But this is just the first layer for wires, and most projects tend to have different kinds of wires. You might have different gauges or different colors of wires, and you'd want to set up your own layers. But like with most things in AutoCAD Electrical, you don't do it through the base AutoCAD layer command. Instead, there's a special way to do that. So I would go to the Schematic tab if I wanted to create some wire layers, and I would come right over here to this tool, which is called Create or Edit Wire Type. And then right over here, I would have the opportunity to create any number of wire layers. And those would be created using the standard down here. And so these are examples of something that's called a replaceable parameter. Replaceable parameter is like a code that is replaced with the thing that it points to. So %C is a parameter that means color, and %S is a parameter that means size. So this is going to be replaced by the color underscore the size. And you can change this if you want. There are different replaceable parameters you can select from, and you can learn about them in the help. But you can feel free to set up your own standard here. Like, for example, I'm going to put in the word wires and then underscore, because when I create my wire layers, I want them all to be alphabetized together. So they'll all be like some kind of wires. So that's what I'm going to do for my standard. And then right here, the layer name that will actually be created will have the color name and the size of the wire. And so right up here in this kind of spreadsheet-like interface, I can create different layers. So I would start by specifying the wire color. I'll click right on this cell here on row 2. You see row 1 is the default wires layer, and you can't change that at all. It's kind of like layer 0 is in base AutoCAD. It's the prototype layer in a sense. So the wire color, I'm going to click on that cell on row 2 and type in red. And then I'll click right on size over here and I'll type in a size. Let's say this is a 10 gauge, and I could use a number, or I could say maybe 10 AWG or American wire gauge. And then I can press the tab key to go to the next cell. And you can see that it automatically used this format right here. So it has the name wires underscore the color underscore the size. And so in this way, I can go through and create my wire layers. But this is just the name. I would also need to specify the actual color and have that be red. And I could optionally specify the line type or the line weight. Here I'll set the line weight to be kind of a thicker line, 0.4 millimeters maybe. And I'll just make one more wire layer just for this demonstration. Let's say this is going to be yellow. So I'll type in YEL, and then I'll click right over here, and I'll make this a 12 gauge wire, and I'll press tab. And then I can change the color to yellow, and I'll set the line weight. Now, I think the 10 gauge wire I used 0.4, and so a 12 gauge wire is actually thinner, and so it will be a thinner line weight, let's say 0.35. Okay, and you could customize this with all of the wire layers that you use, or to save time, if you've already done this in another drawing, you could just import the layers from that other drawing if you click right here. And typically that's what you'd do. You would just import an existing drawing in here and get all of its wire layers. Now I'll click OK, and that results in the creation of these layers right here, you see? So these are wire types that I've set up. Now I want to draw some of those wires, but not on the panel drawing. I want to go to the other drawing, sheet 1. So I'll go up here to previous drawing, and that's going to open up my schematic. So somewhere on this sheet, I'm going to start drawing some wires. And I'm going to turn off the grid right here, so I just have a black screen. Maybe I'll zoom in up here in the upper left-hand corner. I'll just draw a few wires. I'll go to the wire tool, and before I start drawing, I'm going to click on wire type. This is an option on the command line, and you can click on it here. Or you could type in the capitalized letter. This is a base AutoCAD feature. I could type in T if I wanted to execute this option. But I think it's easier for me just to click right here, wire type. And then I'm presented with this, this diagram, but I don't see the wires in here. Now, why is that? The reason is I've saved those in sheet 2. And here I am in sheet 1. So what I'm going to do now is go back to this command, and I'm going to import from sheet 2. I'm going to import these wires these wire layers that I've already set up, and then OK. So now I should have those available. I can go to wire type, and then I can just choose from my list. I want red. OK. Now I can't change anything here. This is more of just a, you're selecting which one you want. I want red. And then I can go ahead and draw in my wire. And I'll click once to start drawing, and I'll click again over here to stop drawing. And then I can continue drawing. And it's interesting, this command alternates between horizontal and vertical orientations. So if I click again, I've succeeded in drawing a vertical segment. If I click again, it's horizontal. Now what if I wanted to keep going horizontally? Well, you can just type H for horizontal to force that direction. And if I went vertical and then it wants to go back to horizontal, I could type V to keep going vertical if I wanted to. But you can only draw horizontal or vertical segments with this tool. I'll hit escape to cancel out. So if you want wires at different angles, you have to use these other tools. These are different angles. So if I wanted a 45-degree wire, I'd use this tool, and then I could draw the wire like this. And you see what happened is AutoCAD Electrical put in a wire cross right there. And it did that in the form of this loop. So these are not just lines. These are really electrical wires. And if I were to draw, let's say, another wire here from this point up to this point, AutoCAD Electrical has put in a wire T, and that means that these are electrically connected. And this wire T is actually a block on layer sims, and it's automatically put that in for us. And so there's a lot of automation that's happening here when you use these tools. And in fact, if you go up to the undo command and open the arrow next to it, you'll see that we have various marks, and these represent the various steps that we've taken. But for each step that we've taken, AutoCAD Electrical is actually using a bunch of different commands in here. Groups of commands have happened. So if I want to go back a step, I'm going to go back to the previous mark. If I want to go back again, I would go back to the next mark. You see? So AutoCAD Electrical is actually doing a lot of different things behind the scenes when you're using these tools. Because it's built on base AutoCAD, it has to do these steps incrementally. So let me draw another wire. This time I'll change my wire type to yellow. And then, as you might expect, when I draw this wire in, it will appear in yellow. And it's alternating again between horizontal and vertical. And if I draw this wire over here, it's going to jump over the red wire with a wire cross. And that indicates that these are not electrically connected. If instead I terminate the wire on the red wire, we get a wire T, which means that they're connected. But because they are electrically connected, they're all part of the same wire network now. And thus, they have to all be on the same wire type. And it changed all of those yellow wires to be red now because they're all part of the same wire network. And so when you're drawing and making connections, it's going to automate some of this for you. And this is generally a good thing. But this will kind of get you started on thinking about how you're drawing your schematic wiring diagram. You're not just drawing lines in AutoCAD. You're using these specialized tools to get the job done. And there are occasions where you will draw circuit diagrams just like this, wires in space, if you will. But more often, perhaps, you'll want to create your wires in a reference system. And I'd like to just kind of give you an idea of what that is next. So a reference system would be a ladder, for example. So you have ladders, or you have XY grids or X zones. These are different reference systems that you can choose from in AutoCAD Electrical. I'm going to insert a ladder, and a ladder is a system that lets you reference your components using line numbers. So for example, we could have a one-phase or a three-phase ladder. Let's make a one-phase ladder. And I'm going to start my first reference number at number 100. And I want to increment that with an index of 1 so that the first rung on my ladder will be 100, and the next one will be 101, and then 102, and so on. Up here you can specify the spacing, and this is going to be in your default units. So in this project, because I created it based on the NFPA demo, it's using imperial units. So these are inches. So 0.75 inches. If this number was like 400 or something, it would be indicating a metric unit of millimeters. So I'm going to change this to 0.5. So ½ inch between my rungs. And down here you can draw rungs, which are horizontal, or you can have no rungs and just have buses. So there's the hot bus and the neutral bus. Or you can have no bus and you just get numbers. I'm going to say yes to get both of them, and then click OK. So now I'm off and running, and the command line says specify start position of first rung. I'll click a point right over here, and observe that the cursor is kind of jumpy because snap mode is turned on, and AutoCAD Electrical will automatically turn that on and off as needed. So I'm going to click right here, and then observe that as I bring the mouse down, I have this kind of preview image of how long my ladder might be, and I'll click my second point down here to specify the end of my ladder, and it's automatically built out this ladder for me, just as long as I've wanted it to be. Now if I wanted to edit that ladder, I don't do it here. This is how you create a ladder. If you want to edit the ladder, you come over here and go revise ladder, and then you can see that we have one ladder, and its spacing is ½ inch. And there are 20 rungs. We start at number 100 and we're incrementing by 1. And the wire number format that we're going to use uses a replaceable parameter that's based on the number. That's what %n means. So if I wanted to change something, let's say I wanted 22 rungs, and then I would change that and then press tab, and it automatically checks redo because it knows that something has changed, and it's going to just calculate what the ending number will be. And when I click OK, it adds those. But observe that it just added the numbers. It didn't also add rungs, and it didn't also extend the buses. We have to do these things ourselves. So if I wanted to extend these buses longer, we actually use the old-fashioned, if you will, stretch command, which is located right over here on the Home tab, I can simply just stretch these wires down. And I believe I have polar tracking mode on right here, and that allows me to drag these straight down. And then I can come in here back to schematic, and I could add some additional rungs if I wanted. I would say add rung. And the way this works is you just click nearby to that number somewhere in this area, and it will add the rung there. So in this way, we have the flexibility of where we want to put our rungs. And so what is all of this? This ladder is just a ladder of electrical connections. And on that ladder, we would then put components. So a component would be accessible over here, and you can create components in lots of different ways. And I cover all of these in my more extensive course at sourcecad.com. For now, let's just look at the icon menu. And we have basically two different ways of navigating through our component hierarchy. We can do it with these icons, or we can do it with this tree over here. So let's say we wanted a push button. I'll click on push buttons right here. And that takes me into this category, push buttons. And then in here, I could get, let's say, a push button NO, which means normally open. And then I have this component, and I have snap mode on, because when I click right here, it's going to be exactly on the rung. So I'm going to click right here, and it's going to automatically get the rung number. So this is push button 101 because I placed it on rung 101. It uses a replaceable parameter %n to make this happen behind the scenes. And in here we have yet another large dialog box with lots of optional parameters that we can specify. So for example, I could specify right here that this is located in a specific place. Let's say this is in a specific room or panel of some kind. Let's say that this is part of an operator station. I'll use all caps op stay for operator station. And then perhaps I would associate an actual part number with this, and that would be over here under catalog data. If I knew that, I could type it in. I don't though, so I can click on lookup, and that will open up this catalog browser. And we have different possibilities for this type of push button. So I can select something here and say OK, and that will put in the manufacturer's code and the catalog number. And we could put in more information in here, and we can fill this out later when we know more. But at this stage, I'm happy with it, so I'll just click OK. And it puts in, this is all part of the same block. It says op stay up here, and we might think that that's part of the rung above. And so we might want to rethink our ladder strategy to have our rungs that are farther apart, perhaps. Or we could move this component up to rung 100. So if I wanted to move this component, I could do so. There's a special command in here for that. We can also scoot a component, but let's look at move component first. So move component would be used when you want to move a component to a different wire. So I'm going to move this component. I'll move it right over here. And when I do that, it's going to realize that this component has moved to a new line reference. So would you like to run auto retag? Yes, I'd say OK to retag. And it's going to change that now to push button 100 because that is the rung number that it's on. There's all kinds of automation that happens sort of behind the scenes in AutoCAD Electrical like that. Now, that would be move component, but we might also want to slide that component along, and we would do that right here with scoot. Scoot is sort of like the move tool is in base AutoCAD, but it's specific to AutoCAD Electrical. And what it can be useful for is scooting a component along a wire. And I can move the cursor back and forth, but I can't go off the wire. It has to stay on that wire. So I can just move it around on that wire. That's what scoot is useful for. So in this way, you can start to put in components and have them be electrically connected to one another on these rungs. And then ultimately, you're going to represent those in a panel drawing. So if I wanted to have this be on a panel, I can go over to my panel drawing here, and I'll just zoom out. So far, there's nothing on this yet. I'll turn off the grid. And let's say we want to place that push button here as a panel diagram. And these would be called footprints. A footprint would be the physical representation of that component with the actual size that it occupies in the real world. So in the case of this push button, we can access that over here if we want to bring that in. And actually it's not going to be on the schematic tab. Now we're talking about a panel diagram. So I'll use the panel tab. And then I can go ahead and access this, and I'm going to choose schematic list because this will allow us to insert and annotate a panel footprint by referencing the schematic component list in the project. And so in order to make this happen, there's a special block that has to be inserted, and you'll just want to say OK to that. And this is an invisible block that stores some of this information. And so in this case, I want to extract the component list from the entire project. Which locations do I want to extract? Well, in this very simple example, I can get all, but if you had a more complicated project, you could get them from just a specific location, let's say the operator station. So I could look for the operator station in the current drawing, and there's nothing here, so we're not going to find it there. I could look in the project, and if I want to look in the project, I have to save this drawing. And it's going to then look in the project. Oh, and it finds a location. There it is, operator station. And so it's able to look in there. And so in a complex project, you can search just within a specific location for your components that you want to deal with. And then you say, OK. And then here we have a listing of the drawings. So I want to look in sheet 1. Here's sheet 1. And so in a complex project, you might have hundreds of sheets, and you can select the sheets you want to look in. And then you're going to move that down below. So I'll click on Process, and it basically moves that drawing down here into this list. And then I'll click OK to actually process that. And it finds a component, PB100, that we can use. So here's this component right here. And I would like to use that as a footprint in my panel drawing. So I can click right here on Manual, or I can automatically insert it. In this case, I'll just say Insert. And it's going to prompt me to select a location for that. I'll place it right here. And then it's going to need to know its rotation. I'll just press Enter to accept the default. And so this is the footprint of this push button. And it's automatically tagged push button 100. The catalog data that we entered is shown here. I can click OK. And then it shows an X here, which means that it's already been taken care of. And if I had a long list of components to go through, I could hide the existing ones that I've already done, and it would just show me the other ones that I had to place. But now I've come to the end of my list, so I can just close out of that. And so at the end of the day, we're left with this kind of drawing of this button. It has an octagonal shape to it. It has some attributes on it, red, and it has another attribute, which is the component tag number. And I could choose to hide those attributes if I wanted to, or I could leave them. If I wanted to hide them, I could go over here, and there's a way to do that. I think it might actually be hiding attributes is something that's actually on the schematic tab over here, and I think I can hide an attribute. I'll hide the PB100 like that. And then maybe I want another footprint on here, like a nameplate that would identify what this is. So I could do that. I could go and add that, but this time I'll go to the panel tab, and I'll add that not from the schematic list, but I'll add it from, let's say, the icon menu. And this is the footprint, insert footprint dialog box. And it looks a lot like the component dialog box, but these are all footprints now. So what I want is a nameplate, and I want this nameplate with a catalog lookup. And I'm going to go ahead and add this from the catalog. I'm going to add this red one here. Okay. And then I'll click on my button, enter, and it adds the nameplate automatically. And I can put in a description here. I can say this is a what this push button actually does. Let's say that this is a conveyor start. Okay. So it creates this nameplate, which would actually be on a piece of equipment or a panel of some kind in the real world. And so this kind of completes the idea that we have two representations for the same thing in AutoCAD Electrical. We have the panel representation of it, and we also have the schematic component. I'll go back here of that. And once you create this, you can go between them by positioning the cursor over the component and then right-clicking. And this opens up what we call the marking menu. And I can go to the surfer, and the surfer allows you to move between schematic and panel representations. So here we see that this is referenced on sheet 1, and it's on rung 100, but it's also referenced on sheet 2, and there's a nameplate, and there's the actual footprint right here. And if I click on Go To, it will take me there and zoom me in on it. And I can go ahead and zoom out, and I can zoom in, or I could pan. And in this way, I can identify where this is in a complicated drawing and close. And we can also surf the other way. So I could come in here on the panel diagram, on the footprint, right-click on it, and I could then surf back to the representation on sheet 1, the normally open push button on rung 100. I can go there, and there it is. So in this way, you can make this connection between your schematic and panel diagrams. So this should really give you a lot of food for thought about how AutoCAD Electrical works, how the project hierarchy is set up, and how you can start to create diagrams both in terms of schematic and panel diagrams. So I go into all of this and much more in much greater detail in the full course, which is available over at sourcecad.com. I'm going to be creating a mini project today in AutoCAD Electrical 2024. Here I am in the interface, and I've opened just a blank drawing, drawing 1, and you have to be in this non-zero dock state, as they say, in order to enable the project manager. When I'm not in a drawing at all, then this is partially disabled. So you just need to go into any drawing and go ahead and create a new project by clicking right here. And by the way, if you don't see the project manager, if for some reason that was closed, you can get it back by going to the project tab and clicking manager. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project now, and we get this interface where we need to enter the name. I'll call this one mini project motor control. And it's going to be stored into this default location under your documents folder. This is the standard folder that AutoCAD Electrical stores in locally. And this could be on a file server if you are working in an office, let's say. Here I'm going to create a folder with a project name. And so the folder is going to exist with the same name as the project. And the project file ends with the extension WDP, stands for Wiring Diagram Project. And right here we need to copy settings from a project file. And this is where all of these demo projects come in handy. If you're just starting out of the box with AutoCAD Electrical, this will help you get started right away. But if you've already created projects in the past, you might select one of your past projects here. I'm going to leave it selected on the NFPA demo project. This is a North American fire protection standard that I'm using, so that has imperial units. You can optionally go to the descriptions and you can type things in here. So perhaps I will. I'll type this all in caps. I'll just say motor control. Okay. And I can optionally go to the properties of the project, or I can just close out of this. Let's go to the properties. Take a look at that. So here are the project properties. If you just clicked OK, you wouldn't see this, but you could get to that by right-clicking on your project and going to properties at the bottom of the shortcut menu. Same difference. And in here, this is where you're going to see your schematic libraries. And these are the folders where you have all your components. And so it's using the NFPA versions. So essentially that's what was selected here when we chose that NFPA demo project. It put in these paths for us. Now, there's a lot in here that you can configure. I'm not going to go over it right now or belabor it. You can read the help on this. And this is just a small part of my AutoCAD Electrical course on sourcecad.com, which you can check out. I'll click OK. And so now we have a project, and it's at the top of the list now, and it's in bold type. That means it's active. But this project doesn't have any drawings in it yet. So let's create one. So the next button here is New Drawing. So I'm going to create my first drawing, and I'll call it Schematic 01. And this is going to require a template. Just like whenever you create any drawing in AutoCAD, you can use a template. So I'm going to browse, and it takes me to the template folder, which is really nested deeply in the file system. So in this template folder, because AutoCAD Electrical is built on AutoCAD, we have some generic AutoCAD templates that start with lowercase ACAD. These are all the kind of vanilla templates in here. And then we have a couple of templates for AutoCAD Electrical right here. This one is in Imperial, and this one is in Metric. And then we have various standards down below. ANSI is a standard that's used for drafting, and it has different sizes that we would use in North America. DIN is a German standard. GB is a Chinese standard. We have different standards in here, so you can take your pick. I'm going to go with the ACAD Electrical template here and use that to create my drawing. Now, the location where it's stored will be off of your project folder. So this is just going to be in that mini project motor control folder. And I'm going to give it a description here that it says schematic drawing. And these descriptions will typically fit on the title block, and there's not a lot of room there, so you don't want to have a really lengthy string of text. So that's why we have like up to 3 descriptions. Down here we have optional style designators you can put in. And this would be useful if you had like different facilities, different installation locations. Location is like a place within the facility. Down here we have the sheet number. This is sheet number 1. And the drawing number, let's say that's drawing number 101. And we have optional section and subsection. And you can use these fields in different ways, just depending on the kind of project that you're working on. You can have this, be the emergency control panel, or, whatever would fit the needs of your particular project. So then I'm going to say OK, and that will create the drawing using the template. And evidently this template comes with a title block, which says Autodesk on it, and it has the data that I entered, motor control and schematic. And down here it says it's drawing number 101 and sheet 1 of 1 so far. So if we want to revisit that, we can go in here under properties, and we can get all this information. But also I'll refresh this and right click on my drawing, and the drawing also has its own properties. So this is an interesting fact in AutoCAD Electrical, is you have 2 sets of properties, one for the project as a whole and one for an individual drawing, and these standards can differ. So here we have schematic drawing, and that's why we're seeing that the word schematic is here. But evidently this title block doesn't have another attribute for drawing. So if I wanted to move this up here, I could do so. But then you'd think, well, why didn't it show me? It should say schematic drawing here, and it doesn't. So if you ever change any of the information in your title block, you have to go to Title Block Update. This is located on the Project tab. And then you can call for the specific piece of information to be updated. I think that's the drawing description that I've updated right here. And I'll say, OK, active drawing only, and it updated that one piece of information. So just because I changed it there doesn't mean it updates in the title block. We have this extra step where we have to go through this update process in order to make that happen. Okay, so now I have a title block, and if you're a longtime AutoCAD user like myself, you might be surprised that the title block is here in model space, but that is in fact the way that we work in AutoCAD Electrical. We don't use paper space. We just draw it all in model space, and it keeps things really simple and streamlined. I'm going to turn off the grid by clicking right here on the status bar, and I'm going to draw my schematic diagram on this sheet. So the first thing I'm interested in is creating a reference system for my components. And a reference system is, there are 3 different types you can use. And to see that, I'm going to go into the project properties, and I'll go over here to drawing format. And right here, the format of your reference system can be an XY grid, so that you would locate your components on these rungs, and they would get these different addresses. And this just makes it easier to identify where your components are. You could use X zones, and it just has numbers across the top. Or you can use reference numbers, and this is the kind of the most granular approach, where you have different numbered rungs. And this is called a ladder. So we have ladder defaults up here, and your ladder can be horizontal or vertical. I'm going to leave it vertical. And in this project, because I started this project with the NFPA standard, it has imperial units. That means that these numbers in here are in inches. If we had used a different standard, let's say IEEE, these would be in millimeters. So I'm seeing low numbers like 4.5, that is inches. So I'll click OK, and I'm ready to create my ladder. So I'll go to the schematic tab, and then right over here in the insert wires and wire numbers area, you'll find something that looks like a ladder right here. And if I open this up, you can see that we can insert these 3 different types of reference systems. I'm going to go with a ladder, and then I'm presented with choices about how that can be made. In this case, I'm interested in creating a 3-phase motor control circuit, so I'll make a 3-phase ladder by choosing this radio button right here. And this grays out some of the features that are available for 1-phase ladders. So in a 3-phase ladder, we can specify the spacing between the numbers, and I'm going to change that down to 0.5, so 1/2 inch. And the first reference number I'd like to use is reference number 100, and I'm going to increment by 1. So each rung will be like 100, 101, 102, and so on. And the spacing between my buses here are going to be, it's also going to be 1/2 inch. I'll click OK, and then position the cursor up here kind of in the upper left-hand corner, and click once, and then move the cursor down a ways, and click again. And this will put in my first reference system here. It goes from 100 down to 115. Now, the number that you ended on will vary depending on how long of a ladder you drew. But now we have these 3 phases, these 3 wires coming into our project. All right, now that I have a ladder, I'd like to start drawing wires. And before I get into that, I need to set up different layers to receive my wires. So I'm going to go right over here to this icon, which is like a wire icon with a pencil on it. This tool is the Create Edit Wire Type tool. And by default, we have just one layer for wires called wires, but I'd like to set up a bunch of different layers that have different colors and different wire gauges. And the way that we do that is with a standard down here, and the standard is controlled with these different replaceable parameters, as they're known. So %C is a replaceable parameter that means color, and %S is another one that means size. So we can use those replaceable parameters in any combination that we want. And if you look in the help, you can find other types of replaceable parameters that you might use. So I actually want to reverse these. So I'm going to put %S first, and then underscore %C, because I want to see the size of the wire first, and then the color afterwards. And also, I'd like to alphabetize these all together in my layer list. So I'm going to put the cursor right in the beginning and type in wires underscore. In this way, I'll get layers that all are grouped together, and they all start with the word wires. And then they'll be differentiated by size and color. And then up here, I can create a new layer by clicking in one of these cells, such as wire color. I'll click right there and activate that cell, and I'll type in a color. I'll just use a 3-letter abbreviation. So this is going to be a black wire, BLK. And the size, let's say I'm going to say that's a 10 AWG wire. So that's an American wire gauge. And American wire gauge standard has thicker wires. With the lower the number, the thicker the wire. So this is a fairly thick wire, and I'll press Tab. And so now what that does is it activates the full layer name, and it concatenates these things using the replaceable parameters, and it puts them into this layer name. So wires, and then it has the size and then the color according to this format. So it's not enough just to call it black and give it a size. You also have to change these properties of the layer over here. So with that row selected, and it's all blue, I can click on color here, and I can change the actual color of the layer. So for a black wire, I have a black background, and so I don't want to choose a black color, or I won't be able to see it. Why don't we make a compromise and choose, let's say, color 9, which is kind of a middle gray. That will be my color that I will use for black. And then the line weight, I'd like to have a thicker line for this thick wire. And so let's say that my thickest wire will be 0.4 millimeters, will be my thickest actual wire when it's output on a sheet. It's interesting that we have a project that is in inches, but line weights are given in millimeters. And this kind of makes sense to me because mechanical pencils have these given sizes in millimeters, and it's kind of used the world over. So I'm quite familiar with what 0.4 millimeters looks like. Okay, so I've created my first wire type and wire layer. Now I'm going to create a bunch more using the same process. I'm going to make it the next one here. I'll target this cell and I'll type BLK. And let's say this is going to be a 14 gauge wire, and I'll press tab, and then I need to change the color, and it's going to be color 9, and the line weight. So let's say my thickest line was 0.4, right? So that would be a 10 gauge. Let's say that would be a 12 gauge, and this would be a 14 gauge. So I'm going to go in even numbers. So 10, 12, 14. So 14 gauge is 0.3 millimeters. Great, so I've created 2. Let's make another one that's white. And the white one will be a 16 gauge, and it will be white, like literally color 7. And the weight for a 16 gauge is going to be 0.25. And let's make a red wire. And let's say this is a 14 gauge. And so I need to make this layer red and 14 gauge. So let's see, this is 10, 12, 14. And I also would like a yellow 14 gauge, yellow 14 gauge. And how about a blue one as well, BLU 14 gauge. And we just have a couple more to do. Green, this is going to be for ground, and that will also be a 14 gauge. And finally, I'll have a thinner red wire, make that an 18 gauge. And so that has to be red. And I need to figure out what the line weight would be. So if I'm starting at 0.4, this is 10 gauge. So 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Okay. Okay again. And that actually creates layers. So if you go over to the Home tab and open up the layer drop-down list, you'll see that we now have all of these different color-coded layers. And they follow that naming convention that I set up. And I like to have my layer drop-down also available up here on the quick access toolbar. So I've turned on layer right here, just like that. That way I can get the same information up here, no matter what tab I'm on. Okay, so I've already drawn in my 3-phase bus. I'm going to change this to be on a different layer. Instead of being on the default wires layer, I'm going to set that to be a 10 gauge black wire. And that turns it gray because of our layer. Excellent. So I'm going to save this drawing. I think it will be more straightforward if I run my 3-phase wires horizontally here instead of vertically. So what I will actually do is erase these and create new wires. I'll do this with the multiple bus command right up here. And this allows us to draw vertically or horizontally. I'm going to set the spacing to be 1/2 inch in either direction. I'm going to start here in empty space, and I'll go horizontal. And you can click these buttons here just to set the number of wires that you want. You can have 2, 3, or 4 wires. I'll use 3 wires and click OK. And then I'll position the cursor right next to number 100 and observe that as I move the cursor, it's kind of jumping around, and that's because snap is on right down here. And this is a useful feature when you're trying to line things up with your ladder. So I'll click right here next to 100 and draw a horizontal run like this. And I want to be careful not to go up or down because I could turn the corner like that if I wanted to. But here I'm just going to stop and click there and put in those 3 wires. And I just want to check to see what layer those are on by hovering the cursor over it. Right now they're on the default wires layer. So I'm going to change that now to be on my 10 gauge black wire. There we go. Now I'm going to draw in a circuit breaker. This will be in my master circuit breaker. And this is the first time that I'm going to insert a component here. So I'll click on the icon menu. You see, this is a drop down and we have different choices. I'm going to take the top choice, which is the icon menu. And this is a special interface in AutoCAD Electrical. So I'm interested in a circuit breaker. So I'll click right up here on circuit breakers and disconnects in this tree. And I have a 3-phase situation. So I would like a 3-phase, I don't want to disconnect. I want a master breaker here. So here, 3-pole circuit breaker. That's what I want. And then I'm going to click right on the wire here. And notice how Snap is helping me. It's letting me choose exactly right there on the wire. And because this is a three-phase situation, we're asked whether we want to build up or down, depending on which wire we clicked on. So here, in this case, I clicked on the top wire, so I need to build this down. I'll click down. And now we're presented with this Insert or Edit Component dialog box, which you're going to become very familiar with in time. And this allows us to enter lots of different data, and you don't have to enter it all, especially right in the beginning. But I think what I will do is type in a description up here. I'm going to call it main breaker, just for short. And I'll go ahead and click OK, and it puts that in. So we have what are actually three different components here, and they're linked together with these vertical wires. And if you position the cursor over one of these, you'll see that this is on a different layer link. And I would like to show this a bit differently. Let's go over to the Home tab and open up the Layer Properties Manager. And here's Layer Link right here. I'd like to change the line type on that. So I'll click on Continuous, and I would like to load in a different line type. I'll click Load, and I'm going to scroll down here for dashed, and then select it again. And if you do it right, it'll say dashed right here. And then I can close the Layer Properties Manager. Now it doesn't show up as dashed because we need to also control the line type scale. This is a very old base AutoCAD feature. It's a system variable called LT scale. I'll type in LTS, enter, and I need to change my scale factor. Now, if you want to make more dashes, you have to decrease the scale factor. So I'm going to try 0.25. So it's somewhere between 0 and 1. And now I can actually see dashes in there. And that's what I want. I want my links to show up as dashed lines like that. So these breakers are all tied together in the panel. Now, where is this breaker? We can specify that by positioning the cursor over one of these components and right-clicking. This opens up a special user interface element in AutoCAD Electrical called the marking menu. And the marking menu allows you to choose any of these options around the ring. And you can also go down here and choose different things from this menu down below. Now what I want to do is just edit the component. So I'll drag up or just click on this button right here, and I'll come back into the same dialog box. Now here I'd like to specify where this is located. So I'm going to put in a location code. An installation code is optional, and that could be used for a different facility, let's say. A location code might be a particular location within the facility. And I'm going to type right in here. I'm going to type in, let's call this one the cabinet. And I'll click OK. And then it says this drawing contains related components, namely these other ones. These may no longer exactly match the edited component. Update to match the edited component? Yes. So I want them all to be in that cabinet together. And now they are. So I've done this, and notice that this circuit breaker is CB100. It got this number. I didn't have to type that in. It got that because I put this on rung 100. And so it read that off of my reference system. So there's my main circuit breaker. Now I'm going to create some more wires. So I'll go back to schematic, multiple bus. And this time I want to draw wires that start at another bus. And I'll click OK. And then I'm going to click right here on this top wire and run this down. And I'm going to run this down and then over. You see how there's these green arrows? When I'm running it down, I'm not clicking, I'm just moving the cursor over this way. And that way I can turn the corner like this. And I'm going to run this like over this way. And before I click, I'm going to kind of try to eyeball that up with my reference system on the left, so that it's not just sort of in between, but it's more or less on line 108. The top one is on line 108. I'll click right here and press the escape key. And so this has created a new run of my three-phase wiring. And if you look up here, AutoCAD Electrical has actually done a lot of things behind the scenes. If I go up to the undo arrow and click the arrow here, you'll see that it's done a bunch of different things. And if I went back to Mark, this would be prior to creating this run of wires. And so when you undo something in AutoCAD Electrical, you tend to use this side arrow and you go back to the previous mark like that. Now, if I want to redo that, I can go in here and redo all these things. Okay, so that kind of gives you a clue that these tools in AutoCAD Electrical often execute multiple different steps to get the job done. And so that has an impact on undoing and redoing. But right here, what's happened is it's added these different symbols. This is actually a block on layer sims, and this is an arc. And this represents an electrical connection. And this represents a jump over the wire. So these are not electrically connected. And you can control how these appear if you go into your project properties under styles. You can then see right down here the wiring style. So the wire cross is loop, and that's why we're getting the arc like that. But we have other choices. We could have a gap, or we could have a solid line. I'm happy with the loop. I'm just showing you where these are. The wire T, this is called a T, and it can either be a dot or these two different kinds of angles. I'll leave it on dot. Okay, so this is not only graphical representation, but these wires are electrically connected when they have the wire T's on them. So that means that this is wire number 100, and so is this one here. So we've kind of reversed the order. And we can see the wire numbers if we go up here to wire numbers, and then we can tag them with numbers. So we can tag wires in different ways depending on the context. So in this context, I want to tag them using a line reference, namely these numbers over here. If we were doing a schematic diagram like an electronic circuit or something, we might want to run them sequentially. But here we have a ladder, so let's use the line references as our wire numbers. And I'm going to tag just the ones I select. So I want to tag new or unnumbered wires only. And I can do that in a lot of different ways. I could go the whole drawing, the whole project, or just picking the wires I want. I'm going to pick these wires here, let's say these three, and press enter. And it shows me the wire numbers up here because these are part of the same wire networks. So this is wire 100, and this is part of the same wire network. If we wanted to see the wire number again, there's a way we can do that. We can add an additional wire number in here. I can just have to hunt around for the tool here. Copy wire number, that's what I want. So I could copy, inserts an extra copy of a wire number. So I could do that here, here, and here. And so it's labeled these. So this is wire 100, and you can see that this is also wire 100 down below. And so these are called wire networks. And the copies are actually on a slightly different layer called wire copy. And these are on layer wire no. So, I mean, it's a little overkill to show all of this here, but I'm just kind of giving you an idea of how AutoCAD Electrical fundamentally works. I don't really want to show these wire numbers here because we see them right over here. So what I could do is hide those. I can go wire numbers, where is it? It is located here actually, hide. And I can hide these numbers. Now that doesn't mean I've erased them. They're still there, but I've hidden them. You can turn them back on like this. Okay, so enough about wire numbers. Let's start adding components here. So on this run of my three-phase wiring, I would like to have some fuses. So I'll go to the icon menu, and I'll go and select fuses, circuit breakers, transformers, reactors. And I'll click fuse tag, this one. And then I'll click right on this wire right here. And this is going to be fuse 108. And I'm going to say that the rating on that fuse is going to be 5 amps. So I'll type 5A. And then I'll say OK, repeat. And I'll place another fuse underneath. OK, repeat. And I'll place another one right here. OK. So this is 108. And that's because it's getting its component number from its reference number, 108 over here. And it's not getting the reference number from the wire number. Those are different. The wire number is specified already up here, and this wire is part of the same network. So this is wire 102. But now we have new wire numbers over here because these are getting their wire numbers from our reference system. So you just have to be aware of what's happening here with this. So I have these 3 fuses on my wires. Next up, I'd like to have a way to start my motor. And so I'll go to the icon menu and I'll go under motor control right here. And so I can navigate through the system either using the icons over here or through this tree. So there's motor control. And I'm interested in a 3-phase starter contacts with overload. So I'll click on that and I'll place this right here. And we can build up or down, in this case, down. And I'll just click OK for now. Actually, I'd like to specify where this is located. So this is going to be in a cabinet. So I don't think I have done that. Oh, I have done that before. So I'll just click on drawing. And this is kind of a lazy person's way of doing it. Instead of having to type it in, you can just search the drawing or the project, and you can find all of the locations that have already been used. And in this way, I can just save time typing. And then I can click OK. And it will show me that this is in the cabinet location. And these are linked together. This is the link layer. We've already set up its line type. We see the line numbers and everything. Now let's say on this other side, I want to have maybe a different wire type. Or actually, I think what I'll do is have terminals that I connect a cable up to. And so for that, I'm going to put in my terminals here first. I'll go to icon menu again, and I would like some terminals. And they are located right down here, terminals, connectors. And you have different choices of shape and, the way that you want to depict this. I'm going to choose this basic round with terminal number circle, and I'll click right here to place in my first terminal, and I'll give it number 1. And these arrows are used to increment or decrement. So this is just number 1. I'll say OK, repeat. I'll place another one below that. This will be number 2. OK, repeat. And this one here will be number 3. And then OK. So these are terminals that I can connect wires up to. Now I want to have colored wires connected to these terminals. So I'm going to change this wire to a different layer. I'll click on it, and then I'll change this to, let's say, a red wire that's 14 gauge. And I'm not really seeing any wire thickness yet. That's another issue. So over here in the status bar area, I can click on this hamburger menu and turn on line weight if it's not already. And then I can toggle on my line weight mode here, this one. And then right click and go to line weight settings. And here we can control how thick these appear on screen. You see the actual thickness will be controlled by the millimeters that I set for these layers, like 0.3 millimeters and things like that. But this is just a kind of visual approximation that we can use while we're working here on the screen. And we can tone that down a little bit or adjust it just so that we can differentiate them. I think I need to crank it up just a little bit so I can see that these are thicker. So here's my black wire that's 10 gauge. And this one here is a red wire that's 14 gauge. Come to think of it, we have these relays here and we have overload protection. And so coming out of that, maybe we could use smaller wires. I'm going to select these and change them to be maybe a 14 gauge black wire. This one will be red. This one will be, let's have this one be yellow. And this here will be blue. So these 3 colored wires are actually going to be wrapped in a cable. And to represent that, I'm going to go into the icon menu and turn this into a cable. And that is done, I believe, under miscellaneous cable markers. And I want a cable marker. And I will click right here on this red wire. And it's going to be cable 108. It's getting that from its ladder. And I'm going to give it a wire color ID. I'll click generic, and this will be red. OK. And now we can insert child components. So I will do that. I'll say OK, insert child, and I'll click on the next one. And this will be, this is the yellow one, right? So I need to click on generic yellow, and then OK, repeat. And then here, this is going to be the blue one, and then OK. So now we have a cable 108 that has these 3 wires in it. And I'm going to press escape just to cancel out of that. I don't really want to see the wire numbers over here, so I'm going to hide them. Okay, now that we have the 3 wires within the cable, I'd like to put those into a modular connector that we can plug into our 3-phase motor ultimately. But I think I would like a little bit more run here. And I'll use the regular AutoCAD stretch command for this. I'll stretch these wires over horizontally. And I'd like to put in some modular connectors right about here. So I'll go back to schematic, icon menu, and I would like to find terminals, connectors. And down here, these are the symbols that we want. And we can either have them with no wire number changes on either side of the modular connector, or we can actually change wire numbers. I'm going to stick with the same wire number. That's fine with me. And then this opens up a submenu within this. You can see it over here too. And I want a plug jack situation like this, and I'll place one of these connectors right here. And I will go ahead and say OK, repeat. OK, insert child, and I'll place one right here. And then OK, repeat, place another one right here. Okay, so those can all be part of the same plug 108. I'll press escape a couple of times to cancel out. Next up, I'd like to have a disconnect on the three-phase motor. And so I will go to the icon menu yet again and choose a motor control disconnect. And what I want is a 3-pole disconnect, like this one right here. And I'll place this on the red wire, and I'll go down. And as I've been doing this, I've just been kind of clicking through, but you can specify the actual catalog data. If you come over here and click on lookup, it'll take you to the catalog. And here we have, in this case, we have 948 different records to choose from for a disconnect. And so if you were actually doing the engineering on this, you want to very carefully select your component. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to select the first item in the list here and click OK. And that puts in the catalog number and the manufacturer up here. I can also specify the location code by clicking drawing and just using the cabinet location. But actually, this is not going to be in the cabinet. This disconnect is going to be on the factory floor. So I'm going to say this is fac floor. And then OK. And we see the location code right there. And this is disconnect number 108. And these are linked together. And I will go ahead and stretch these wires over just a little bit more. And I'd like to put my actual motor in here now. So I'll go back to schematic icon menu. I'll go to motor control, 3-phase motor. And I'll place this on the central wire. And I'm going to give this a description of, let's say, conveyor motor. And I would like to specify a catalog item for that. And let's say it's a 5 horsepower motor. Now we have over 5,000 records to sift through, so I'm just grabbing the first 5 horsepower motor that I see in the list for this demo. And I'm going to specify that as on the factory floor. Okay. And AutoCAD Electrical will automatically put these 3 phases into the motor diagram here. So that is complete. The only thing this is missing is a ground, so we can draw that in manually. To do that, I'll go to the wire command. And I'd like to specify which wire type it's on. So right down here on the command line, there's an option for that, which I can just click on. And then I can select the green layer. And you see these X's? That means they've already been used in the drawing. So green, it hasn't been used yet. I'll click OK. And I'll draw this wire from somewhere on the edge of the motor. And I'll draw it over here. And maybe I'll have it come down. And I'll press escape to end the command. And then let's put a ground symbol on the tail end of that wire. So I'll go back to my icon menu, and you can find a ground symbol under miscellaneous, right here, ground. And I'll place that right on the end of my green wire. Okay, so now I've created my main circuit here that runs this motor, but we have no way of turning it on. We have this circuit with these normally open relays, and I need to figure out some way that we can actually turn this on, and there's a specialized coil that we need to actually turn this thing on. So with that in mind, I'm going to continue my diagram adjacent over here. To do that, I'm going to stretch these 3-phase wires further on, and I want to make sure that I have either ortho or polar modes on so I can draw this out horizontally, and we'll just have that go way over here. And I think what I'll do is that since I'm going to be creating a whole new circuit over here, is maybe I will create a new ladder over here because it's really, really far to read the numbers over there. So I'm going to create a new ladder over here. We can actually kind of overlap the ladders if we want to. I'll go to schematic, create ladder. I want a single phase ladder. We'll have a transformer and we will step down the voltage to 120 and we'll just have one phase. So I'm going to put in a 1-phase ladder with no rungs and no bus, just the numbers only. And I'll have that with 1/2 inch spacing. And this is going to pick up where I left off. So at 116, I'll say OK. And I think for clarity, maybe it would be best if I were to start this a little bit lower, but I don't know. We might not have enough room on our sheet. So what I'll do is just start this up higher and run this down all the way near the bottom. So now we have a new ladder over here. And this is going to be naming our components when we put them in adjacent. So there's kind of a hot area, like in this area where when I put components in, they automatically get tagged with their respective line number. This one's motor 109 because it's actually on 109. This is ground 112 because it's closest to 112 over here. So you'll see when we start adding components over here, they should assume these numbers because they're closest to this ladder. All right, well now I need to tap into these 3 phases coming down. And I really only need 2 legs because we're going to use the leg-to-leg potential to get down to 120. So thinking this through, what I really want is a transformer up here to start with. So I'll go to Schematic, Icon menu, and I'd like to pop in a transformer. And I'm going to use a regular transformer like this. And I'll just put this like right here on 116. And I'm going to say line 1 is 480 volts for the primary winding. And it'll be 120 volts for the secondary winding. And this transformer is actually going to be located, let's say, in the cabinet. And I'll just say OK. So we have some information about that. Now I will go ahead and draw a wire. And what I'm going to do is click on Show Connections. And this is going to reveal the connections that are on this particular component. And they're represented by these green X's. And so these are kind of like the hot zones where you can connect wires to. So I could connect a wire to the top of that, that pin right there. It's hard to select because I have snap on. So I'm going to turn snap off. And then when I click anywhere on that circle that's close to that, let's say I click right here, AutoCAD Electrical is going to recalculate where that's going to come from. It's going to necessarily come from the connector, which is right on the top quadrant of that circle. And so I can very precisely draw that in here. And I'm going to have that connect up to the top wire, just like that. And it puts in a T, and that means it's electrically connected to that wire, and it's jumping over these other 2. And then I'm going to connect this again. I'll draw another wire from here, and that's going to go up, let's say, to the second leg. So we have a leg-to-leg potential there that we're going to be transforming down to 120 volts. So down here on the other side of my transformer, I think what I'll do is have maybe a different gauge coming out of here. So I'll say wire, and I'll click on wire type. And this one will be a black wire, but it's not going to be quite as thick. This will be the 14 gauge black wire. And it's going to come out of this transformer right here and run like horizontally, and then it's going to run down this way. I'm going to take it like way down my ladder. And then on the other side, I'll have yet another type of wire. This one will be a white wire. It'll be a little thinner at a 16 gauge coming out of this pin. And in this case, sometimes this will happen. The wire command is trying to draw a vertical wire. It's going the wrong way. So I need to convince it to go the way I want. So I'll just type in H for horizontal. And it's not taking. Let's try that again. Wire type, white. Okay. I'll show the connections. It looks like there is a connector on the right side. There we go. I think previously I clicked on the bottom of that circle, and so it thought I was trying to tap into it from on the other part of the connector. So I'll draw this over here somewhere and then take that down. Okay, so now we have 120 volt potential between these 2 buses. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is kind of figure out how a person would turn on the motor. We're going to need a couple of switches for that. We're going to need a start and a stop, and maybe a running light. So I'm going to draw in a wire coming off of one of these locations, and I can turn on snap to help me. But in this case, it looks like my wire is slightly out of my snap grid. You see that? So we don't really necessarily need snap, because if we just get close to 120, it's wherever we draw this, it's going to identify this wire with the closest reference number. So I'll draw this over some distance and then press escape. And here what I want to do is put in a start button. And my start button, I need to grab from the icon menu. This will be a push button. And this push button will be normally open, right? Because when we push it down, we're going to make the connection and turn on the motor. So this will be a push button NO. And I'll place this right on this wire here. And I'm going to type in conveyor start. And I can look up a button in the catalog, and it's going to automatically put in some search criteria here. So I'd like to have this push button. I only need one normally open button here, one contact. So I'll choose that one. And this is going to go in a new location. It's not in the cabinet. No, this is going to be in a little panel that we put by the conveyor motor. And it's technically on the factory floor, but I think I'd like to identify this location specifically as, let's call it the operator station, op station. And I will say OK. And so that is in a new location called op station. And then coming out of that button, I'm going to change my wire over here to be a different wire type. I'll say that's a red wire, 14 gauge. Or actually, this can probably be even narrower. I'll call this an 18 gauge. It's just really conveying information about turning on the motor. And then we need to have a way to stop the motor, and we need a button for that. So I'll go back to the icon menu, and I'll go to push buttons. And this time I want something that is normally closed, because it'll be in operation until I pull this and cause the circuit to be interrupted. So here I'm going to use a mushroom head normally closed, and I'll place this on this wire here. And this will be conveyor stop. And I'll choose something for this, and I will locate this in the operator station. Great. And now we need this to connect to the actual coil that starts the motor. And I just need a little bit more wire here. So why don't I stretch this over again? And I need to make sure that I'm stretching that horizontally. I'll turn on ortho here. And I'm going to put in a starter coil. So this is something that has to do with motor control. And I'm interested in a motor starter coil. And I'll place this right here. And this will be called the conveyor motor starter coil. And it is located, this will actually be in the cabinet, not in the operator station. And I can choose a part number for that. And again, I'm not really doing the engineering. I am just selecting random items from the catalog. And I'll say OK. And this particular component is set up to have this information. Typically, it's displayed on the right side of the bus here. So what I could do is scoot this over. I'll use scoot, click on my component, and scoot it along the wire over here more. And what I'm actually going to need here, I'm going to get rid of this wire here, is I'm going to scoot it even further. And it automatically extends this wire as I do that, such that these words are just outside of the vertical bus. And then I'm going to connect this up here. So I'll draw a wire, and I don't need to worry about the wire layer, because when I start it here, it's going to assume this layer. You see? So this is 16 gauge white, and this is 16 gauge white. Okay. And you know what else? What we're missing is a running light that shows that the conveyor is on. And what I'll do there is draw in a wire from here down, and then I'll run that over here, and I'll place in a light. So this will be a pilot light, and it's running, which is a good condition, so we'll have a green light. We'll place that right here. And this will be the, let's say it's the conveyor running light. And this running light will be in the operator station. And we could put in some catalog data if we wanted to. Okay. And then over here, I'm going to get rid of this wire, and I'm going to draw in a wire over here, that. And you see, this is all set up now because the text is showing up in the right location. And if we want to really tidy things up, I can right click on this and say align. And then I can click on this light down below and press enter, and it will shift over so that these are vertically aligned exactly. Okay. The next thing we need to do is address this NONC. This means normally open or normally closed. And this indicates a cross-reference that we need to make. So this starter coil, which is in the cabinet, is going to actually close the contacts over here and start the motor. So we need to figure out how we're going to do that. So over here, I'm going to draw in a wire, and let us say that that will be, let's say, a red wire. It will be maybe a 14 gauge wire. And I'm just going to run that under here somewhere. Let me just see where my reference numbers are. Let's say it's on 112. I'll just draw on this wire here for now. And right underneath these, I'm going to put in another component. So I'll go over to icon menu and a relay. I want just a regular normally open contact like this. And I'm going to place this right under here. And we're going to revisit this in a moment. I'll just say okay to get out of there. And then I'm going to line this up with the ones above. So I'll go up here and right click on one of those and line this up so it's centered. And then I'm going to link it together. I'll use this tool to link the components with a dashed line. I'll select this component and then this one and press enter, and they get linked. So these are all connected. And that means when I make this close, all of these will close and start up. Okay. And so what I want to do is connect this relay with this coil. And we can do that from either end. We just need to know their reference numbers. So this is 112 and this is 120. So if I approach it from this side, I could edit the component and cross-reference that to 120. Okay. And doesn't seem to have taken effect over here. I need to also come over here and reference this normally open to 112. There we go. So that's 112, and that is connected to this one on 112. Let me just see the wire number here. Pick individual wires, 112. So we got it. So that is a child component of this coil. They are now connected together. Okay, well that's good, but now we need to somehow trigger this to turn on the motor. And we can do that with some logic, with some software, ideally. And for that, we need to connect our system to a programmable logic controller, or PLC. And so for that, I'm going to draw a PLC over here on my circuit diagram, on my schematic diagram, and I'm going to link it up over here eventually. So let me do that. I'm going to draw in a wire coming from 125, and I'm going to have that come over about that far. And let's put in a circuit breaker here so we can turn off this line if we want to. So I'll go ahead and add a circuit breaker, just a 1 pole right here. And this is going to be in the cabinet, and I can look it up and put in some type of circuit breaker. This one will be a 15 amp, let's say. So there it is. And now I'd like to route this over here. And we can do that by sending a signal from the source to the destination. So I can do that right up here, source arrow. So this is the source. And the way that the signal works is you use a code for that. So I'll click use, and that uses this suggested code number over here. And then we can increment or decrement this however we like. So I'm going to start with sig1. And each time you send a signal, you have to use a unique code. So this is sig1. And you can search the drawing or the project or these different ways of locating signal codes that you've used so far. But because we're starting from scratch here, sig1 is fine. And we can choose different arrow styles. These are different ways you can show this. I'll use number 1, that's fine, and click OK. And then it says insert matching destination arrows now. Now, because I'm in the same drawing, so my destination is right over here, I'll click OK. But if I was sending this signal to a different drawing, I would say no. And then I would choose destination arrow up here in the separate drawing. But as I said, this is all very simple and it's all in the same drawing. So I can just click OK. And then I can click on the destination right over here, and it's going to add that. Now it says change destination wire layer. It's because this wire and this wire do not match up, and they're really the same circuit. So we need to do something about that. I actually want this to be red, and I don't want this to be white. So I'm going to say no. And then it's up to me to come in here and change this to be on the same layer as the other one. And I can't remember if it's 14 or 18. Maybe it's 18. What is this here? No, it's 14. So I need to make sure that I match the layers up exactly. So this is the same. This is 14, and this is 14 red. So we don't have a problem now. Now, there is another issue, and that is that it says the source is saying it's going to 112, and that makes sense. Here's 112, and it's coming from 125. So we've successfully sent and received the signal. However, we have question marks here and here and here. And that's because this doesn't yet have a line number on it. So what I could do is add a wire number to individual wires. I'm going to number this one, and I'm going to number this one. Enter. And so this is wire 125, and that's also wire 125. You see? Because it really is the same wire after all. We're sending that signal over here, and so we're having to interpret this diagram in this way. And the reason is we want these to all be shown together in this schematic. So I can stretch this over, or actually I could scoot it too. I could just scoot this, I believe, like that. Okay, so I've done that. Now over here, I want to put in my PLC. So how am I going to do that? PLCs are programmable logic controllers, and you can make them either parametrically, that is, they're built on the fly, or you can specify a full unit from the catalog. Let's try the parametric approach. And here we can choose from a vast array of different products. And this is the last one I used, Allen Bradley 1771 discrete input 1771-ID. And this is a 6-point unit. We can show it in different ways. I'll show it maybe like this one, number 2. I'll have it be vertical, and I'll click OK. And you can see how big it is, and I'm going to place it, let's say I'm going to place it right about here. And then the spacing should probably match your ladder, which is 1/2 inch. And the I/O points, we can insert them all, or we can allow spacers and breaks. I'll say OK, and it's now going to build it. I'll say this is in rack 1 on slot 1, OK. And the beginning address, there's different naming conventions you can use for that. I'll just choose the top one here and say OK. And then I could add a spacer, or I could just add the next one, and keep doing that until you get to the end. I'll add a spacer now, another one, and we have to insert a total of 6, I believe, on this module. So I added some spaces in there. So it dynamically built this PLC for me depending on how I answered those questions. So this is a component that's going to live in the cabinet, I believe. Let me go and edit that component. This is going to be in the cabinet. And we can specify each one of these different addresses. We can specify what they do. So this one is going to be conveyor, let's say conveyor motor start. Okay. And it says it right over here, see? So what I should do probably is scoot this over scoot this over such that the text lines up with the text above, like so. And maybe what I need to do also is probably move this. I probably need to move it down because it is interfering up above. But if I do that, it's going to require it to be retagged, I believe. Let me just use the regular AutoCAD move tool. I'm going to move that down. And then we're on a different rung. It says PLC 125. I probably have to get this to be retagged. I can go here, retag update, and it's going to realize it's now on 126. Here's 126. Okay, so what I want to do is connect this ultimately up here. So what I'm going to do is maybe see if I can scoot this down to 126, and then OK to retag. This is 126 now. And this is the wire number probably also needs to be updated. So I need to go into wire numbers, and I need to retag this one. Now that's 126. And I need to retag this one. So you can see how moving things around can have a real cascading impact on your project. So this is just maybe first connector right here is my conveyor motor start. And I want that to be on this same line. It's real close, but maybe I'll just move this up just a little bit in my case, so it's a little bit more centered. But it's still going to be on 126. Okay, so then I'm going to draw a wire coming out of this, like that. And what I want to do is route this side in here. So we have another situation where I'm going to send a signal. I'll say source arrow on here, and I'll use sig2 by clicking use and click OK. And insert the matching destination arrows now, OK. And then I'll click on this wire, and it comes in. It's coming from 112. That is correct. But it has question marks on it because I need to add wire numbers here. And we also need to connect this whole PLC up to this bus somewhere. And I will just draw a wire here. Now, if this were a real PLC, you would have other connections to it, and you would have a software side where you would be programming this to control this circuit in some way. But this is how you would depict it in your schematic. And so I think I've completed the process now of this entire schematic design of this whole motor control circuit. So now I'd like to kind of switch gears and create a panel drawing that shows a better representation of how these components would look in the real world. So for that, I'm going to create a new drawing in my project by clicking right here, new drawing, and then this will be called panel 01, and it's going to use the same template and location, and this will be called panel drawing, and it will be sheet 2, and it will be drawing 102. Okay, so I've created that, and this time it shows up here automatically. If it doesn't, just click refresh up here. So now I have a brand new drawing to work in. I'll turn off the grid, and I can see that this says panel drawing. Okay, so what am I going to do here? I'm going to represent, first of all, the operator station. So let me open up schematic 1. And by the way, you can navigate between drawings in your project by using these arrows up here. So I can go to the previous project drawing, and that will open up my schematic drawing, and close the current drawing. And so let's just think this through. We have an operator station that is going to have just 3 components in it. It's going to have the start button, the stop button, and this light. Those are the only things that we need in a little panel that's next to the conveyor belt. So let's draw that. I'll go to my panel drawing now. And I'm just starting from scratch here. So what I need to do is figure out which components I need to place in my operator station. So I'm going to go to my panel tab and go to the icon menu here. Now this is a different icon menu. And when you first start this, you have to put in this special block, which will hold certain pieces of data. So you definitely want to click OK there. It's going to place an invisible block in the drawing that will contain these things. All right, now I want to put in a push button, right? So I can click here, and I want a button that would be the start button. So I can go push button normally open, and I can draw this myself or use one of these symbols, or I can look it up in the catalog. And I'll look it up in the catalog, and what I'd like to have, this is a start button, and it's going to maybe be this one. I'll say OK and OK. And then I can place this footprint. It's called a footprint now, not a component. And the footprint will actually be the actual size of this physical component. And then the command line tells me to select the rotation. I'll just press enter. And now it's prompting me with this dialog box, which is similar to a component, but it's for the panel. And this is going to be the conveyor start. And its location, we don't have a location here. We don't have a location in the current drawing, right? But we have a location in the project. So I can then choose it from here, operator station. Okay, so there's my first button. It says RE because it's red. All right, excellent. Now I'd like to label that button in some way. So I'll go to my icon menu and I'll choose nameplate. And here we want this nameplate with a catalog lookup. And then I can say catalog lookup. And we can choose from one of these colored nameplates. This is a start. I'll just have it be gray. Okay, and OK. And then click on your button and press enter. And it gets the data that it's showing here from the associated component, or footprint rather. So this nameplate is getting information from its associated footprint. Okay, great. Now this is one way of doing it. Another way is to come in here and go to the schematic list. In the schematic list, the first time you run it, you have to select where you're going to get your components list from. So I want to extract my component list for the entire project. It's not in this drawing. It has to be from the project. And I want to get maybe everything from, I'll save this, everything from the operator station. Okay. And then where am I going to get that from? I'm going to get it from the schematic drawing. I'll go process, that moves it down here, and then okay. So now it's searched my schematic drawing for anything that has operator station as its location. And so now I can see that I need to place these elements. Now, I created this button kind of in a vacuum. It didn't get associated properly with the actual start button in my schematic diagram because I just made it all by itself. But by doing it this way, I can check these items off the list. So I can select the conveyor start button here, and then I can say insert and insert it right here. Okay. And then it has an X here, which means that it's existing. And I can then say hide existing. So then I have a short list of components that I have to add into my panel drawing. So the next one I could add would be the stop button. And I can say insert and place that here, and then okay. And then I'm left with a running light, and I can insert that and place that here. Okay. Now I no longer have anything that I need to place, so I can close this. And so I don't really need this one here. I'm going to delete that. I'll click right here on delete footprint. I'm going to delete these two. And then these could have nameplates, so I can add those manually. The nameplates get their data from the footprints. So I can use a certain nameplate and I can look it up in the catalog and I can choose like what color do I want my nameplate to be. Gray seems fine. And I'll say okay and get this one here. And I'm not sure if we can do this on all three, but I'll try it and say okay, okay, and okay. Yes. So these nameplates got their data from their associated footprints. And so in this way, I've placed these three buttons, and I can move these around. I could just use the regular move tool. It doesn't really matter where they are. They're not on a reference system. This is more of a physical representation of these footprints. And what I might want to do is use, like, let's say layer sims and draw in a rectangle around these to represent the actual metal cabinet that these would be in, or the operator station. And maybe I'll label that with some text. I'll just type text, and I'll click a couple of points here to specify the height, and I'll just type in operator station. And that's a terrible font. I'm going to change my style ST. This is a kind of vanilla AutoCAD feature. And I'm going to change my font from TXT, which was probably designed in the 1980s, believe it or not. I'm going to set this to Arial, fly, and close. So we have the operator station, say. So this is a representation now of what this would actually be. And I can now surf these components. So I can make the connection between this button and where it is in the schematic diagram by using the surfer. And the surfer is going to now show us the references that this has throughout our project. So this is referenced twice on sheet 2, namely the button itself and the nameplate. And then it's referenced here on sheet 1. So I'll go to that and it zooms me right in there. I can then either zoom in or zoom out and close this, and I can see that this button is what we're talking about when we're talking about that footprint. And I can surf right back. I can surf back and go to this nameplate or this button, go there, and here we are. So in this way, we can make that connection between them. And we have the tag here that's shown in blue. We don't necessarily have to see that. We could hide the tag, but I'm not going to bother doing that. Now over here, I'm going to start to assemble some of the footprints that we need for the cabinet. So I'll go to my schematic list, and I would like to show all. And I want to change the way that this functions now. So I'm going to pick file, and I want to choose the project, and I want to choose a named location from the project, I need to save this drawing, and that named location will be cabinet. Okay. And then I need to choose where I'm getting that from. It's the schematic 1 drawing. Move it to process and OK. And now we have a short list of all of the components that we need to place in the cabinet. So I can go and get the main breaker. I'll manually insert that. I'll look it up in the catalog, and we would need to specify what kind of breaker we want. I'll just get the top one. OK. And I can place this here. So this is what this actually looks like. And I can say OK. And that's checked off. So I can hide existing. And then I can add, this is a transformer. I'm going to skip that. It's probably a larger piece of equipment. Maybe it would go on the ground. This here is, well, I'm not sure. Let's see what that is. I'll insert that. This is another breaker, evidently, has the same representation. Okay. This here is the starter coil, and I will insert that. Okay. And then this is the PLC, I think. I'll insert that here. Okay. And then close. And so here, this is an example where we need to update another drawing. And I can add that to my task list. And then when I go on break or before I leave the office, I can process my task list over here. And the reason you might want to defer that is that if one of your colleagues has that schematic drawing open, you won't be able to process this until they release control of it. So I'm ready to do this. I'm just working alone. So I can just select all of these things and say, OK. And it's going to save this drawing and then go over to that other drawing and make those changes. And the schematic drawing had to be updated so that we can surf between them. I can surf now to wherever this is on my schematic sheet 1. And then I can see, OK, that's the circuit breaker right there, this one here. And if I want to go back to where that is on the panel, I can surf back. And there it is. So in this way, we can get the more physical representation of how this would actually be in a panel. And then it would just be up to us to place this in some kind of enclosure. I'll just draw a rectangle around these items. And in a real project, of course, you'd probably have a bunch of other things, fuses, and you might have all kinds of things in your actual cabinet. But I'm just going to copy this text here over here, and then I'll just edit this and call this my cabinet. So there you have it. We've completed our mini project of creating both the schematic diagram and the panel representation of what we have created today. So if you learned something here and you liked what you're seeing and you want to learn more, I highly encourage you to check out my much more extensive course on AutoCAD Electrical at sourcecad.com.
So that was the basics of AutoCAD Electrical with a project-based course. Now, if you want to earn a certificate of completion for finishing this course, and also if you want to download its lesson files, then go to SourceCAD and enroll in AutoCAD Electrical Essentials course. It's completely free and it's linked in the description of this video and the first pinned comment as well. Let me know what topic you want us to cover in the next one, and I'll see you in the next video.